A teacher accused of secret meetups, FaceTimes, and messages with a 14-year-old student, and that may just be the beginning. Sadie Flores is a wife, a mom, and a teacher now accused of grooming a child. What police say a parent found when they allegedly went through their child's phone that made authorities get involved and put a new law that has just been on the books for a couple of weeks into action, putting this teacher behind bars. We're on the case, presented by Law and Crime. I'm Chris Stewart.
A mother picks up her daughter's phone just to check in. That's all. And in 5 minutes, her entire understanding of who her daughter's teacher was, it's gone. We're not starting this one with a channel intro. You don't need one. You need to hear what this mom found first. Late-night FaceTimes. Messages that weren't about homework. Weren't about school at all. A teacher. A grown woman with a wedding ring and a church group and a toddler of her own. Allegedly reaching out to a 14-year-old kid in the hours when parents are asleep. And look, I've covered a lot of these cases. A lot. But something about this one sits different. Here's the thing though. It's not just the accusation. It's the timing. Because 3 weeks before deputies showed up at Sadie Flores' door, Kentucky passed a brand new law.
Largest allegations at this point. She's innocent until proven guilty, but they are allegations accusing her of a potential sex crime with a middle schooler. So take a look at this. This is the Facebook post that features Flores prominently on a law enforcement agency's page. And this is taking place in Graves County, Kentucky. I want you to look at this picture that the local sheriff included in his post about Sadie Flores, and you can just see the anguish on her face. You have to imagine this picture was taken right as she learned of what she was going to be accused of, and she's probably coming to grips with the truth that her life will never be the same if what she's accused of is true. I just got the uniform citation out of Graves County, and it lays out some shocking information about what police say led to these charges and what the mom of the alleged victim says that she found on a phone, including potential late-night conversations between a teacher and a student. Now, there is a twist to this case. Kentucky has a new law that is related to grooming, and this law just went into effect last month. It's weeks old, and the law is being applied here as a felony. And before
a law written specifically for this exact situation. A law that didn't exist yet when, allegedly, this relationship was already happening in secret. You already know what I'm about to say. We all knew this was coming. Every state that drags its feet on protecting kids online eventually has a case that forces their hand. Kentucky's case might be Sadie Flores. Now here's where it gets interesting. Because everyone wants to make this simple. Predator. Victim. Case closed. But the person who actually broke this case open wasn't a detective. It wasn't the school district. It was a mom sitting on her couch, scrolling through a phone she almost didn't check. That mom is the one nobody's talking about. She's the real story here. She found messages the citation says were not of a legitimate purpose. Not school-related.
The local sheriff says that his agency first learned that Flores was having what he calls an improper relationship with a student through the school district. And the allegations were disturbing and the allegations were serious. And the school district calls the local authorities to get involved. Deputies then seized electronics. They say they did several interviews. And they also say they interviewed Flores. And after that, she was put under arrest. So here's the uniform citation that we just got in. It says the parent of a 14-year-old student went through their phone and reportedly found messages between her child and Flores. Investigators say the messages, quote, were determined that were not to be of a legitimate purpose and were not school-related. But there's more. The parent also says there were multiple incoming phone calls that were later identified as FaceTimes that had occurred multiple times in the late evening hours that the parent wasn't aware of. Now, on the next page of this citation, investigators write that Flores allegedly communicated with this minor on multiple social media platforms, quote, attempting to manipulate the minor and expressed feelings of love and admiration more so than just a student-teacher relationship. It was also determined that they met in secret before a school function that Flores was not part of. but she lived close by. Quote, it was also determined that unauthorized, untraceable communications had been conducted at least 4 days prior to the waiver that was signed by the parents of the minor that has since been revoked. Investigators have submitted preservation requests for the above Snapchat and TikTok social media.
She found FaceTime calls stacking up at hours no teacher should be calling a student. And she did the thing so many parents are scared to do. She looked closer. She didn't talk herself out of it. She didn't assume it was nothing. And because of her, deputies seized electronics. Interviews happened. An arrest happened. A woman who taught special education, kids with learning disabilities, kids who trust adults because they have to, is now sitting in a jail cell. But here's the question nobody's answering yet. If this mom hadn't checked that phone, how long does this go on? I need you to stay with me here for a second because this is the part that gets buried every single time. The documents allege Flores and this student met in secret. Before a school event she wasn't even part of. That she lived close by. That unauthorized messages were happening days before a supervision waiver was even signed by the parents. A waiver that's now been revoked.
Accounts and the investigation is ongoing. So more charges could be coming with what authorities potentially find on those accounts. Now, Flores is charged with grooming a minor. That is a Class D felony in Kentucky, and that law is less than 1 month old. The crime that Flores is charged with became a crime on July 15th. That's it. It defines grooming as an adult over the age of 18 targeting a minor, quote, with the intent to entice, coerce, solicit, or induce the minor to engage in sexual conduct with the person or another person. It goes on to say that it takes into account a trust violation that happens when a teacher crosses the line as she is accused of. It reads, quote, being a person in a position of authority or position of special trust, he or she engages in grooming behavior directed at a minor who is under 18 years old with the intent to entice, coerce, solicit, or induce the minor to engage in sexual conduct with the person or another person or develop an intimate or secretive relationship with the minor. Now, with how the law is written, and the fact that she is charged with this felony, a D-class felony.
Every piece of that is a breadcrumb. And every breadcrumb leads to the same unanswered question. How long was this building before anyone noticed? Can I be honest with you for a second? This one got to me. Not because it's rare, it's not, and that's the scary part. But because on the outside, this woman looked like every teacher we were told to trust. Church photos. Family photos. Proud educator posts on her classroom door.
Before I break down that part of the case, I want to back up for a second and talk about Flores, because for as shocking as it may be that any teacher would cross the line with a student, it is even more shocking when you just see who she appears to have been at home. A loving wife and a loving mom. She appears to have a young daughter. She appears to have married her high school sweetheart. She posts regularly about her family on social media. As you can see here, she's active in her church. And it also appears she was really proud of what she did for a living. She was a teacher. Here's her post from the start of last school year, and you can see her name prominently displayed outside her classroom. Flores was a teacher at Graves County Middle School. It's a public school located in a rural part of Kentucky, and it's in the southwest corner of the state, not far from the Tennessee border. And the charge she is facing is a grooming charge. Now, what we know about Flores is that she claims to have been an LBD teacher. That was on her Facebook page at Graves County Middle School. And LBD means really the same thing as a special education teacher, according to Northern Kentucky University. And they write in a post about that line of work saying they teach pre-K through 12th grade students who have learning disabilities such as dyslexia, dysgraphia, and dyscalculia, or behavioral emotional disorders such as ADHD, cerebral palsy, anxiety, depression, or schizophrenia. So we are talking about some of the most vulnerable students who she was in charge of looking after and teaching. Now, it is unclear if the victim in this case was a member of her special needs class or it was just another student at the school. We also know that this teacher was a volleyball coach at one point in time at this middle school. It also appears she played volleyball in college, so she was very active outside the classroom. But let's get into how Flores, this wife and mom, became the target of a sex crimes investigation.
That's what makes people go quiet when they suspect something. They don't want to believe the nice ones. That's the pattern, isn't it? You know it. I know it. The ones who get caught almost never look like what we were taught to fear. Actually, wait, let me say that differently. It's not that they don't look dangerous. It's that we were trained not to look at all. And that's exactly why this new grooming law matters so much. And exactly why it's already controversial before Flores has even had her day in court.
Of up to $10,000. According to WKRC TV, this grooming law was proposed after a music pastor sexually abused a young boy in northern Kentucky. Authorities say that relationship started with the pastor building a relationship, grooming the student online before things became physical. And supporters of this law say that it's very important to put in steps to make grooming a crime to keep up with widespread cell phone use. And these laws need to be in place in hopes of preventing sexual abuse before it begins. Now, according to a group named Enough Abuse, 20 states have passed laws defining grooming. There's 18 states, Kentucky's one of them, that criminalize grooming. Now, it's unclear how strong the evidence is in this case against Sadie Flores, but we will.
Legal experts are already warning this statute is broad, vague even. One attorney pointed out the law never even defines the word intimate, the exact word the whole charge hinges on. So which is it?
Yeah, I mean, typically, like in how does the definition, I know there's a couple states out there that have like criminal charges related to grooming. And we've seen cases where grooming, kind of that term is associated with sexual abuse. In this case, it's unclear at this point. Doesn't seem like there was any physical sexual abuse that's being alleged at this point. But typically, what do you define as grooming, and how can that vary just depending on the state where a crime may take place?
Sure. And Florida has its own, fairly recent grooming law that's gone into effect as well, and it's a little bit different than this one. But the intent is to stop adults from engaging in conversations with children that are sexually inappropriate. Or, if you, I know that one of the pieces of language in the statute is that to not have any type of secretive relationship. I think that there's, an instance where you may have communication through an established line, like a school email, where you have back and forth conversations about something that can be tracked. There seems to be an exception for that in this statute in Kentucky. But what I think they're trying to discourage is maybe a teacher and a student having a Snapchat communication or an Instagram communication or Discord communication. That might be secretive. And so, even something as simple as having a non sexual outside conversation with a child that is not through an approved school use email or communication device could potentially be considered grooming if you're trying to establish a secretive relationship with the child under the statute. So there's pretty broad power on the part of the police and the prosecuting attorneys to look at something that could be conduct that's just trying to establish a relationship with the child that's not even sexual yet. That could potentially fall as under the grooming statute in Kentucky as well, from what I'm reading.
A necessary shield for kids who can't protect themselves online? Or a law so loosely written that any teacher who cared a little too much could end up in cuffs? Maybe both. Maybe that's the uncomfortable answer nobody in a courtroom wants to say out loud.
Come with something like this.
Sure. So when you always hope as a citizen who's rooting for the right thing to happen, you always hope that they pick a solid case. So I know that this case indicated that they had taken some electronic devices, likely her cell phone or computer. Hopefully they have picked a strong case where there is strong evidence of grooming in the communication history, whether it's text or whether it's email. Hopefully that is there in the either the phone or the computer that they took to evaluate of the teacher and the student. So the state and the police should pick strong cases to make sure that there's not really a doubt. Like, you're going to look at this and say, oh, they're talking about meaning to make out, or they're meaning to you know show each other body parts, or talking about naked pictures or something like that. That's a strong case. But if there is some ambiguity in the communication, just like if the texts are, hey, I missed you today, I'm looking forward to seeing you, let's, maybe I'll see you at the Starbucks that's next to the school. Could that be grooming? Perhaps. You and I have seen cases where communication starts out simple like that, where there's nothing pushing sexuality. You're just testing a child's willingness to communicate with an adult. So So the grooming can start out, innocent, and build into something. So you just really hope that as these new statutes come out, they pick strong cases. If it's a weak case, the step for the defense lawyer would be to file a motion to declare the statute unconstitutional because it's vague. Vagueness in a statute can be a basis for a criminal defense lawyer to challenge a statute and say, hey, it's unconstitutionally vague. Nobody can know what intimate communication is. It's hard for anybody to know.
Here's what we do know. Investigators say they've submitted preservation requests for her Snapchat and TikTok accounts. This case isn't finished. There could be more charges. There could be more messages nobody's seen yet. This is still unfolding right now while you're watching this.
That and generally in these types of crimes, you have to be able to pick out the intent. This is an intent crime, and so they look at the intent of the communicator.
Yeah, and I wonder, how many cases, again, I'll say it again, where we look at like the pattern that'll be laid out by law enforcement, and it's like you have this moment where you're like, man, if there could have been someone that could have come in and stopped this Snapchat friend request from happening, this victim wouldn't have been abused. But then at the same time, it's like nobody can see into the future like that, unfortunately, until we have the benefit of hindsight. With that said, how often in the cases do you see, like, is there this pattern of grooming that can often lead to, sadly, the physical sexual abuse that we'll talk about?
Almost, I would say more than 98% of the cases, there's some type of grooming. It's very rare unless they're in the cases where there's not just plain out forcible sexual contact, where, excuse me, where grown-ups are trying to see if there's an opening with the child. There's almost always grooming of some sort. Outside of those cases where there's just straight up, forcible, sexual batteries that take the grooming out there, there's almost always a grooming, and it's simple things starting out like, hey, how's your day going? Reaching out, when you're not reaching out about a school, subject, you're just checking in with the person. That could be grooming. Taking somebody like you were talking about, earlier, maybe there's a coach that picks a kid up and takes them back and forth to practices sometimes. That could be grooming. Or it might not be grooming. You kind of don't know until you see what the end intent is. So it is difficult, but there's almost always grooming of some sort.
And that mother, the one who started all of this by checking a phone she probably hoped had nothing on it, she's not getting a headline. She's not getting a statement from the school district thanking her by name. She just did what every single parent watching this video hopes they'd have the courage to do. So here's what I want to know from you. Not the school district. Not the sheriff's office. You, if it were your kid's phone sitting on that counter tonight. Would you look? Because Sadie Flores is innocent until proven guilty. That's how it has to work. But somewhere out there right now there's another phone. Another late night message. Another kid who doesn't know yet that something's wrong. Tell me in the comments. Would you have checked? And how many of you already have?